All right. All right, everybody, we'll just get started in 1 minute here with our Philly Emerging Tech pregame show, day 3. We have loved the interactivity we've had with everybody, talking on Slack, communicating about things, lots of great questions all week. Looking forward to a really good day 3 as well. Really looking forward to what's coming up.
I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow morning with no ETE. It's going to be like, this is awesome. This has been so great. The pregame, the keynotes, and the feedback we've been getting from everyone. Really appreciate it, folks. All the back and forth conversation and amazing questions and equally amazing answers. I can't wait to go through all of it again later on.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, I'm Ken Rimple.
I'm Sujan Kapadia.
And welcome to the pregame show, day 3, like I said. Couple things here. First of all, if you like what you're seeing here, we do this every week. We do a dev news, tech news chat show called Tech Chat Tuesdays. It's on my original podcast stream I started over 10 years ago at chariotSolutions.com/techcast. You can also find us on iTunes and the Play Store and Spotify and all sorts of places as well. So we'd love to have you tune in. And also on YouTube. Also wanted to mention that too, since we're kind of looking at that here.
Ken tolerates me once a week, so I thank you, Ken.
No, it's the other way around, actually. So past year's ETE talks, and eventually these, but you're going to get access to them internally first as an attendee. But past year ETE talks, let me see. I'll show you this website here. So we go to Chariot Solutions on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Chariot Solutions. And if you go on over to playlists, you're going to see a great Philly ETE super playlist, as well as last year, the year before, all the way back. Tons and tons of stuff on here, as well as our other content that hopefully you'll find useful. I mean, we talked yesterday about our discussion with Brian Getz about the retrospective of Java 25 and all of our Tech Chat Tuesdays. So if you're interested at all, you can either go to the playlist and like and subscribe, or you can subscribe to our podcast as well. So thank you for being here. We're going to have our guest on at 10:30 Eastern. So we're going to talk first a little bit about what's coming up. So let's talk program notes a little bit. So our 2:45 slot of the day, we originally had Matthew Plord. He is not going to be able to make it. So there are 2 talks in that slot, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just in case you were looking forward to that one, we won't have that particular talk. And we're updating the schedule right now. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first of all, we're going to start out today with Kent Beck, and the Jessica Kerr, who are both great speakers. I can't believe we got Kent, Sujan.
I'm super, super excited. And I have the distinct honor of introducing them today. So I can't wait. It's like, every day has been awesome. And I actually like having 3 different keynotes. I don't know, for some reason last year when we were discussing ET early on, I wasn't expecting that. And I know early on we were like, how are we going to fill 3 keynotes? And, it's not easy finding those kind of people to start off the day. And it's just amazing that every day has been a powerhouse in the morning. And, Jessica Kerr is a big friend of ET, and she honored us by speaking multiple times. And she's on the committee and helps organize the conference. So it's just like, it's awesome.
Yeah, we're really blessed to have her. I love Kent's his biography on the site. It's particularly funny. It starts out with Kent Beck hates writing biographies. It's like talking about yourself in the third person. Then he goes on to list such skills as guitarist, singer, storyteller, walker, poker player, programmer. That's 6th, and artist. But I love that list. So definitely check out Jessica as well on her multiple talks in ETE, including 2019 and 2018. And she had a really good talk on something called Semathesy, which is a really interesting thing. She calls herself a Semathesist. Like it's the system of developers and people who all contribute to a project and what they mean to the project, I believe. Just a great talk. Definitely must watch. So we look forward to seeing everyone. Don't forget there's the keynote channel on Slack that you can, ask questions in. And our keynoters have been very, very gracious to be involved in that. So now the 12:15 slot, we have Matthew Hawthorne and Lee May Nassere doing more by doing less. a loafer's guide to software engineering. So it focuses on delegating, focusing on things specifically, and saying no, and how that benefits you and your team. That's all I really need to hear.
That title reminds me of the XKCD cartoon where the two guys are like Nerf sword fighting on their swivel chairs, and he's like, "Are you supposed to be working?" He's like, "My code's compiling."
What will we all do now that we have little time to do that? And so Matthew is an engineer at Comcast. He has his picture pointing right at you. So if you look, it's a good one. It's like, that. So he's focusing on messaging systems that are driving customer experience. And we knew Lime when she worked at Comcast. And now she's working at Spotify as an engineering manager, working on homepage personalization. And she's spoken at multiple events for Chariot, including ETE as well. So it's great to see her back. Then we have our own Keith Gregory. You don't know him, do you?
Who is he? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I know that he says AWS practice lead, but then when I ask him questions, he knows way more than a practice lead would. He is a really, really in-depth cloud architect and solution architect. He's just fantastic. And so
in-depth at everything.
Yeah. And he's going to be talking about observability. So his talk, observability in you. He kind of looks at the concepts of observability, of the different pillars of it. The systems and tools and techniques that you're going to use to make the most out of them, and this concept of observability culture.
If you want to know about AWS, if you want to know about how to grow hops or make cider or sourdough bread or fly a plane, you can talk to Keith on any of those topics.
He's a smarty. And he also spends a lot of time, I'll give a plug to the AWS meetup that they have, a Lehigh Valley AWS meetup group that he spends a lot of time speaking at. Michael Gears, bye front end monolith. I'm really interested in this one since I'm wrestling with front end single page apps all the time. Accelerating feature development with micro front ends. So the concept is cutting your front ends up into vertical slices, and then you can have different teams develop pieces of your front end, and they'll explain how that works. He's a full stack developer in Germany, and he's building e-commerce systems for a company called Bureau für Informatik, I believe is how you say it. I probably got that wrong.
We're seeing that micro front end pattern more and more. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the problem with writing a big front end in a single page app is you got to wait for the whole thing to load, and then it's you got either a mono repo or some huge honking repo to deal with, and you can't get multiple people to work on it, multiple teams anyway. So that'll be really interesting. And he also is the author of Micro Frontends in Action, so he should know something about it, and runs micro-frontends.org. So that's just at 12:15. A lot of choices there. Then we move on to the 1:30 slot. We'll have Llewellyn Falco, and I am just going to jump over to my sessions here because I had it listed and I don't have it anymore. His is a cutting code quickly. From 0% to cleanly refactored 100% tested code. So we're going to talk to him in a few minutes, so we'll just put that aside. But that's his talk at 1:30. Then we have a really interesting talk on the JDK on something called Project Loom, which is kind of an incubator for new technologies that are being rolled out. And one of the biggest ones there is fibers. So we have the project lead, the tech lead, Ron Pressler, who runs the project.
Really looking forward to that talk.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that talk to see how Loom, how these features like, work, fibers, for example, and they're supposed to be a simpler form of doing threading than working with the threads themselves because they're kind of lightweight threads.
Yeah. Other languages have things, similar to that. Python has kind of coroutine. Golang has Go routines. Clojure has their, channels and things. I think ideas lifted from Erlang and other. It's amazing how a lot of these ideas have actually been around for decades.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty cool.
And then we have David Nolan. So right there's three completely different and completely in-depth talks. We've got ClojureScript in the age of TypeScript, which, we have a lot of people moving down the road of doing things in TypeScript because it's a typed language and it's, you can find a lot more bugs than programming in plain old JavaScript.
Yeah.
And he's an old friend of Philly ETE, has spoken numerous times for us, and he's the creator of ClojureScript and a lot of libraries and tools in the Clojure community. So I'm really looking forward to his talk too.
Yeah. With you folks at Chariot that actually they do ClojureScript on their projects on a daily basis, and I've only heard good things from those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely worth your time, especially if you're really interested in Lisp or Clojure and functional programming is your game. This is definitely a talk to not miss. And don't worry if you can't go to 2 talks at the same time slot, which everyone is frustrated about because you can't be 2 people at once. Because you got a ticket within the next week or 2, I'll say we'll have all the videos available for you to watch, so you won't miss anything. Now we have the 2:45 slot. We have Richard Feldman, The Edges of Cutting Edge Languages. Where does the language end and the user space begin? So this is one, and I like these talks a lot, where we have different programming language analysis talks. So this is looking at a lot of new languages, and they've been changing the delineation of boundaries for things like compiler versus editor, and functional versus non-functional, and things like that. Non-functional. That's all my code.
Was non-functional. It was the first time I heard of that.
I made that up on the fly. I'm vamping. Can't you see me vamping? And then so he's a functional. What's that?
So you heard it here, folks. Non-functional programming.
Ken's code is non-functional. So he's a functional programmer, specializes in pushing the limits of browser-based UIs. And then our last talk of the 2:45 slot is Geepaw Hill. He's a software development coach. His talk is entitled "This Doesn't Add Up: Failing at Change and How to Try Different, Not Harder." So this is a change management talk, obviously, how we can get better at that. And so I'm looking forward to that from just in terms of like doing better overall managing your projects.
I'm looking forward to that just from a holistic perspective. A lot of changes, last year with the pandemic, and also it's like life needs change management as well.
Yeah, really. It's so true. Yep. So that's that. So let's talk a little bit about day 2. What were some of the talks that you've gone to, and what are some of your thoughts?
So the Brian Getz talk was that day 1 or day 2?
No, I think that was yesterday. I'll go back, but keep talking. It's good. It's good to talk about. I think he was yesterday.
There's a lot to cover on that talk.
Yes,
it's always very in depth, and he comes back many times to ETE, and I feel like he's like we basically get updates about Java from him every time at ETE. So it's become something I've just come to expect now. Thank you, Brian. It's an honor that you come and speak all these times at ETE, and that we kind of just expect you to be there now, representing the Java language. And he always provides a very balanced viewpoint. And if you think about the position he has to be in, right, he getting ideas and considering things from all angles, and seeing like where Kotlin is going, where Scala is going, where all these languages are going, constantly getting barraged with different requests and proposals and things like that. So to be in the spot he is to kind of steer and curate and research the cutting edge and what should go into Java, and keep backward compatibility. He's very humble person. There's a lot of complexity behind the stuff he does, and he distills it really well. I'm not giving specifics on the talk itself, but it's just I'm in awe of the problems he has to solve and the number of constraints he has to think of, and still pushes Java forward in such an amazing direction. And we're really seeing a lot of, I won't use the word innovation because it's been around in other languages, but we're seeing Java consider and adopt a lot of these things, and they do it in a way where they're really thinking all the way through from the language, the syntax, down to the bare metal, right? The performance. And when they do things in the JVM and they add a feature finally, like that they've thought it through, 6 ways from Sunday, and that is going to be performant. So again, I'm just excited at the number of things that are coming about in the Java world. Like you said, I think you said a little bit earlier, we had that Java at 25 thing at Chariot. It's still alive and kicking. It's still growing. It's still evolving. Anyway, I could keep talking about it, but Java's not dead. It's the complete opposite. I can't tell you the number of times I still hear folks kind of say that Java is dead, and I just I don't know. It's cringeworthy to me when I hear that.
So I'm going to suspend this because we have Llewellyn is on here. So let me just get my little title up for him, and let me bring him on the show. Hi, Llewellyn. How are you?
Hello. Good morning.
Morning.
So thanks for coming on the show and talking about your talk that's coming up. We're just doing kind of a little morning pregame show, so to speak. So
That's
tell us a little bit.
You mentioned, by the way, that you can't watch two talks at once, but I have been disproving that this week, as I have opened Zoom in a browser as well, and kept one on my iPad, one on my second screen, and sort of been flipping between talks as when I was like, I kind of want to see both of these.
You're in the Matrix, literally. Well, thank you very much again for being here. We really appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm an Agile technical coach, which is very different than a regular Agile coach, right? A regular Agile coach is like do the stand-ups and the meetings and sit with management and sort of work on process. This is much more about like sit with the programmers and code and learn to code better, learn to code more effectively. A lot of times we're sitting with refactoring because a lot of code is kind of messy. But once we start getting refactoring underhand, then we start looking more into testing and then into deployment. First you have to be able to change the code, and then you want to be able to change it quicker and release it quicker. So that's what I do. And this talk is, I'm not even sure talk is the right word for it. It's like a show-off demo. I'm going to code for an hour. We're going to do a fairly common kata. It's called the Gilded Rose kata. Have either of you ever done that one?
I don't think I've done that one.
No, I haven't done that one.
So this is, I don't know if Emily actually created this one or just like made it massively popular. I always get it from Emily Bach's GitHub repo. And it's, I think it actually comes from something called World of Warcraft. I don't play World of Warcraft for pretty much the same reason I don't do heroin. That's
a good point.
But I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from. And it's just this sort of really ugly code, and you have to sort of get it under control. And it's a nice little kata. And we're going to use a couple different techniques that people maybe haven't seen before. Individually, I really like these techniques, but together they're just crazy powerful. So it's just going to be sort of, 40, 50 minutes of nice refactoring, and then maybe 2 or 3 minutes of implementing a feature using sort of Kempek's famous quote of make the chains easy and then do the easy change.
So let me ask you a question about mob programming, because you have that in your list of things too. So
yeah,
I must be the last person that's heard of mob programming. So maybe I'm not. So in case I'm not.
Do you pair?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's very useful.
Like, for the last year has been very different than, say, the other years, as I have not really left the house. And one of the things that's just been like a huge lifeline to me has been pairing and mobbing, right? Because I forget who said this, but I remember hearing a talk where someone was like, the issue isn't physical space, it's mental space.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how connected are you? And I mean, all of us are just having a lot of Zoom meetings, and not that they're not great, but they're also not great.
That's got to go on our list of quotes.
You just don't connect the same way, right? But the nice thing about when you're pairing or mobbing on the work is you really do connect. Like, it's a much higher fidelity connection.
Yeah.
And so pair programming is pretty simple. It's one person at the computer or the other person telling the person at the computer to do. We're both looking at the same screen. We're both doing the exact same code. We are working as a unit. One of us is working a little bit more as the hands, and one of us is working a little bit more at the higher level. And there's a specific style of pair programming that I helped develop called strong style. And the difference between regular pairing and strong style pairing is that if you're doing normal pairing and you have an idea, you're like, oh man, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. What you usually say is, give me the keyboard. I know what to do. And in strong style pairing, if you have an idea, and again, it's just as much excitement, I know what to do. I know what to do. You just say, take the keyboard. I'm gonna guide you. Right. So the idea in strong style is an idea goes from your head to the computer through someone else's hands.
Oh, cool.
And
I like that.
And so when I first came up with so mob programming came from a thing called Coding Dojo, which was a user group out in Paris, France, which, by the way, is fantastic. I got to go to it back in 2011, and it was my favorite part of Paris. And my second favorite part was Paris.
Wow. That's saying
it It was a very wonderful group. But so they came out to the Agile convention in Chicago. This was back in 2009, and I attended their session, and they were not using strong style. And then as soon as I saw the way they're working, and they're rotating like every 4 or 5 minutes, and the whole table is working on the same piece of code. But what was really confusing is like whenever it rotated, it was really confusing to figure out what that other person was doing for the last 4 minutes, just sort of watching them work. And then a lot of times that work got sort of undone. Like, I don't understand it, so I'm gonna go in this different direction. When you swap that to strong style, so the person who is at the keyboard actually is only typing, not really thinking, and then the thinking is coming from a different person. When you rotate, everyone else at the table got to hear that thinking process or is able to follow it. If the person who's talking isn't communicating well, then there's a really good chance the person who's typing isn't typing, right? Like, you're not going to do what I'm telling you if you don't understand what I'm asking you to do. And so now you have sort of like, say, if you have a team of say 5 or 6 people, one person's typing, sure, but that means the other 5 people are thinking. And so when you rotate, you still have 4 out of the 6 people are still the same people, right? And so that flow is really good. And because of that, we rotate really, really quickly. And this allows a team to actually feel connected, to actually the way I've been expressing this is sort of like, I've spent decades cultivating virtual friends, and in the last year it really paid off.
Yeah, right.
And so through remote pairing and mobbing, like, it's just been, I've just felt very, very connected. And we were out in San Francisco when the pandemic struck, which is a really great place to live if you get to go outside, but not a great place to pay rent if you don't. So we came out to Los Alamos, which is a really great place if you don't have to ever take a plane or do anything like that. And so we are really we're in New Mexico in the middle of nowhere. We're up in a mountain. Like, we chose Los Alamos to build the bomb because it is like in the middle of nowhere and nobody knows where it is. And yet every day I'm super connected to a lot of people that I genuinely care about. And that just made the pandemic feel not isolated and not lonely. It's been a really, really nice thing. We've had to learn how to do it remotely, which was not as obvious. And I've done thousands of mobs, and I had not done many remote ones other than with established teams, where like we would very often we'd meet in person, establish as a mob, and then go back to our respective places and continue. Learning how to form a mob in virtual space, that took a little bit of extra work to figure that out. But I mean, the short answer is we either do one of 2 things. We use Git handoff, which basically we just make a branch in Git, and we're checking in and rotating work in progress. And that allows us to sort of move. That works if you have a team where everybody's environment is set up, right?
Yeah.
And often if I'm working with a team, that's like one of the first things we do is it turns out that like Sam doesn't have permissions and Pam can't see the database. And like it's just weird stuff where it's like you think the whole team has access, but because the whole team hasn't actually tested that access, they actually don't.
You can't switch to different people because they won't have what they need. Yeah. So that's a good baselining. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And if you're in a professional team, spending a couple days making sure the team works efficiently, like that's totally time well spent.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's less time well spent if you're doing like a 1-day class. So in that situation, we tend to use a program called AnyDesk that allows sort of like multiple people to go onto a single computer. And then we've been doing, are you familiar with the phrase cattle, not pets? So this is a phrase that comes from DevOps. And the idea is that like you want your servers to be commodities. Like something goes wrong, just kill the server, throw up a new one.
Yeah.
Not like pets, things that you love and care about and have specially handcrafted and you've been with 10 years. And
specifically, each person has their own, which means the environments are probably different. The scripts are different, all that fun stuff. Yeah.
If that server goes down, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So this is a concept in DevOps, and it's a great concept in DevOps. And I think a lot of people are going there, especially now that, like, I mean, if you go back like 4 or 5 years, Kubernetes was kind of new. But now, like, you know, I have a Kubernetes cluster, I have Docker, like that. Those kind of things are much more standard in deployment. Not that we still don't have pets in deployment, and definitely as we go into bigger code and older code bases. But we've been doing that for dev environments, right? So we will very often throw up an EC2 instance, and we have like these PowerShell scripts that will completely go from completely new machine to working dev environment in about 20 minutes. And those machines last sometimes 1 or 2 hours, sometimes a month. More than a month is really rare. And so the nice thing about having it hosted on Amazon is my bandwidth is not always great. Well, first of all, my upload is always like the most fragile, right? Like my download is usually pretty solid, but my upload is flaky. But Amazon's upload is actually amazing and solid. And so if the three of us are working on an environment, you're not going on my upload at all. You're going on on Amazon's upload and your download. And those are the two most solid. And even if my computer completely blanks out, the two of you can continue on. And so just the responsiveness, it feels like you're typing on your own machine, which is really rare for a remote experience. You know, to have that sort of, it's somewhere in the like 100 millisecond latency.
Are you using Amazon Workspaces? Is that what you're doing for like the desktops or?
So it's just an EC2 Windows 2019 server. Mm-hmm. Our PowerShell scripts actually sort of use a program from Chocolatey called No Annoy, which basically makes the server act a lot more like a desktop.
Cool. Oh, right. Shuts everything down. That doesn't. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we'll open up these ports. We're not going to annoy you with all. Yeah. Just
right. Streamlines it.
This machine isn't going to exist next week, so you don't have to worry about it being too secure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a Windows server, and which works really well. They now have Macs, which I'm very, very excited about. But the Mac EC2 experience is a very different experience than the other one. So they're not virtual machines; they're physical hardware, and you actually have to reserve the machine by the day, right? So you have to sort of say, "I want this machine for a full day," and you're basically just sort of renting a Mac Mini in the cloud, and it's just not as nice of an experience as I'm throwing up a virtual machine. I pay for it by the minute or hour or whatever. Yeah. I discard it whenever I want. You have to like go through extra permissions to even be allowed to turn on the Mac Minis. It's just a different use case. I think it's really made for, I am a mobile developer and I need to run some mobile things, specifically probably testing on the Mac. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Curious. So you were talking about mob programming a little bit earlier, and what kind of problems, features, challenges do you use it for? Is it? I assume that it's not something that you're using for every single thing you ever work on, right?
Yeah, actually, we sort of are.
Okay. Wow.
Well, there's two interesting things about mob programming. One is, very often if you talk to people who've never heard of mobbing, right, the answer that they will say is sort of, well, I've done that once. Like I remember we had like an outage or a problem or something really bad happened, and we were in a conference room and we put the code up on the projector and we all sort of swarmed on it and finished it. Like usually that's people's example. And the reason that works, and something that's kind of amazing about mob programming, is if you have a really hard problem that you don't know how to solve, the group might know how to solve it. Where no individual can, the group can. And so the win of mob programming in this format is that there's this thing you got to do, you can't do it, and now you can. And that's a big win, right? Like there's no question about it. But it's not really the most interesting wins for me. So the two other wins that we get from mobbing is there's a thing that one person in the group knows how to do really well. And then after like a bit of mobbing, the entire group knows how to do it well. As a coach, like this is just like a small little secret. I can go into places like, cause I work in a vast variety of languages. I've gone into places where like no like trickery, right? Like I tell them like, I've never worked in this language before. Let's do some RPG together. Right. And we will sit down, and for the first 2 weeks, I've never heard of RPG. I'm totally new to this thing. But it doesn't matter, because everybody on the team has like if you've ever heard the story of stone soup, right? Where like the soldier comes, he heats the water, and he puts stone. He's like, oh, this could use a little. And someone's like, oh, I have a little bit of salt. We could. Oh, I have a little bit of meat. And all of a sudden you have this stew. And it's the same sort of thing in the team where it's like all these problems keep showing up, but someone in the team knows how to solve them. And now they're sharing their information with everyone else. And I'm kind of getting the credit, like, oh, wow, I learned a lot in Llewellyn session. Like, yeah, you did. Didn't really have anything to do with me, but that's all cool. Because just everybody has it. So there's this huge win of the team goes faster because they are learning from each other. And we are in a place where learning is just so critical. I mean, that's why we're all here at the conference, right? Like we're all trying to learn. And then the other win is when you're doing really boring, repetitive tasks, right? Now, you think that would not be a win, but it turns out, you know what programmers are really good at? Automating boring, repetitive tasks. And so if you put your team and you make them do a boring, repetitive task, like if you take one person, you're like, Ken, need you to do this. Like, you'll take one for the team, and you'll sit down, you'll grind through that, and you'll get it done. But you put the whole team there, and they're going to figure out how to never have to do this again. Right?
Yeah, right.
It's amazing. And it's stuff from like automating how you get your builds out, make your team deploy every week, and that stuff will get automated, right? Make them do configuration scripts, and they'll figure out how to do that. Like whatever it is that's boring, they're going to innovate and remove that problem completely. And that's some of the bigger wins for me, is like, I really like when it's like, oh, the entire process and system have improved. Right. We didn't just get over a roadblock. Like we've made our lives better.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't know there. I mean, I've done the first two examples you gave. I've done it in an ad hoc fashion without us realizing that it's mob programming. Just at times, let's all get together and solve this problem. Or one person knows the area they could really well and wants to teach the others.
Yeah. And it's really useful. I'm particularly fond of mob programming. If you're onboarding someone, I mean, I'm an agile coach, right? So I'm always the person being onboarded, right? Like I can start with 3 new teams this week, and we'll do it again in 2 weeks. So I really appreciate how quickly it onboards people, and it onboards people in. There's a lot of things that happen in a company that are just really confusing to me, right? Where it's like when you onboard an employee, at the moment they know the absolute least about your company, right? It's like day one, they're asking you questions like what kind of computer you want, what kind of environment, the things that are going to stick with you for a long time, right? Like it's really nice to be able to jump into a company, don't have email, don't have accounts, don't have anything other than a temporary badge. And be able to very quickly be like, oh, yeah, we've tried out, like, because in the very beginning, when we sit down, like usually everyone has their own environment. That will normalize quite quickly because one of two things, either there's something that's actually better, right? Where you're like, oh, this environment has these advantages and we are actually moving faster. And if that's the case, once you learn it, everybody goes to it. Right? Like you can think of this sort of like if there is like an actual better food, right? Like this pizza is actually better than that pizza. After everyone's tried it, we're all eating the good pizza. Like that's there. Or it doesn't matter. And it really is just a stylistic things. And so like for me, the way I always think about this, you're talking about Java early. I hate where Java puts their curly braces. Like I feel deeply that this is not the right place for it. But when I'm working in Java, I put my curly braces up there because it's better to be like, if it doesn't really matter, it's better to be consistent than it is to be right. Right? If it does really matter, then it's better to be right. And one of those two things is going to be the case. And whatever is the case, those things will work themselves out. And so very quickly I get to see like, oh, here are all the different environments. And then I get to see which ones have different strengths and which ones have different weaknesses. And then 2 weeks later after that, if you wanted me to set up my own machine, I could make an informed decision about that process. But on day one, the only thing you're going to get out of me is what was nice in my previous context. In my previous context, this is what worked well for me. And now in this completely new context, I'm just going to bring it with me because, well, that's what I'm used to. And it's really unfortunate.
Do you do the strong style with the mobbing? Because I can imagine some people maybe more introverted or just anxiety, so they don't want to speak up or participate as often. So strong style kind of forces them to participate.
Oh, I love that you said introverted or anxiety ridden, because first of all, like I feel as an industry, we are slightly introverted. I feel like some of us who are extroverted in our industry, when we get into like a normal, like just Saturday night party, are the introverts, right? So it's like the extroverts in programming are the introverts in the real world. But you're right that a lot of times, what we think of as like the introverted programmers are actually like, they have really strong anxiety, right? So it's like almost crippling. The thing that's interesting about mobbing in this situation is when we start mobbing, those people hate mobbing. I'll tell you a story about Tony. There's a friend who is out in down near Miami at a client. And when we started, Tony would not mob with us. This is pre-pandemic, so we're in the same room, which is really nice. And as a coach, my job is always to move a team in a way that's sustainable, right? So like I always say, like, it never matters what happens when I'm here. It matters what happens once I leave. So the way I would think about this is like when I was stretching at yoga, and just how, even though I was barely bending, like I was the one who needed the extra blocks. And so the instructor would always be like, make everyone else like lean into it, straighten that leg. And then they would look at me and be like, I'll get you extra blocks. Because like I'm already way overextended, even though I'm doing a fraction of what everyone else is. So for Tony, like, okay, you have to stay in the room while we mob, but you don't have to participate. You just have to be nearby us. You have to be able to see us. And after a couple of days of that, he's like, okay, I want to join the mob, but I don't want to take the keyboard. And we're like, okay, well, we'll do that. So then he's in the mob, but he's not taking the keyboard. And then after a couple of days, he's like, okay, I'm going to take the keyboard, but you're not allowed to tell me shortcuts. Okay. And it was about a month and a half after that. I remember it was close to Christmas. And I got a call and they're like, Tony suggested we mob on this in our stand-up today. And I was like, all right.
Awesome. Yeah.
The thing is that like a lot of time, like if you're an extrovert, right? And I'm definitely on that side of the spectrum. Talking about things, fighting for your ideas, these are things that are much more comfortable. It's not to say you enjoy them, right? But you are much more willing to do that. If you're an introvert, you are much less likely to fight for your ideas. You're much less likely to engage in conflict. You're much less likely to be heard. And once you get to a place where the team feels less like a group of just random coworkers and more like an actual team, like the A team or like a basketball team, like people that you actually trust and can depend on, being heard is more valuable to people with anxiety and introversion. I'd say it's more value for the introverts. The reduction in anxiety is more valuable for the people who have social anxiety, right? Like being able to feel comfortable with your team, that is really valuable if in general you are not. And so definitely like the first couple of weeks are harder on these people. But I think that they appreciate the mob way more when you go like a month later, and all of a sudden they are being listened to and they are being heard. We actually have a rule in the mob of
I'm sorry, that sounded great. We have a rule in the mob. Well, you have a
Yeah.
rule. Tell me more.
We're got some working things here. But one of the rules is if we have a difference of ideas, so like if all three of us have three different ideas, we are not going to figure out which one is a better idea by like talking about them and deciding. Like what we're going to do is first we're going to do your idea, then we're going to do your idea, then we'll do my idea, and after we've done all of them, then we're going to vote. So that because we have strong opinions about things we haven't experienced, right? And very often, like very often, I found myself fighting for an idea that they're like, okay, we're gonna do all the ideas. So we do your idea, and then we do my idea, and damn it, my idea didn't work, right? So it's really nice that like I didn't have to fight for it. That it's just quicker to do it, and 5 minutes later be like, oh my god, this is not going to work. Like, there's a saying from Jared Spool, who's like, when he first started going like into consulting, he had a mentor who was like, sometimes people want to put beans up their nose and there's nothing you can do to talk them out of it. And the best thing you can do is just say, well, I don't think this is a good idea, but try it out and let me know how it goes. And he's like, I thought that was the stupidest idea, but now 20 years later, that's the best advice I ever got. like sometimes if someone has a bad idea, don't try to talk them out of it. Just be like, hey, listen, I think this is a bad idea. I'm going to go there with you. And when we realize it's a bad idea, and then surprisingly, sometimes really genius ideas look like really idiotic ideas, right? So sometimes you're like, oh my God, this idea is stupid.
This can't work. And all of a sudden that's the one that's the best pick. Yeah.
You go down there and you're like, oh my God, no, actually that was just genius and something I didn't have any experience with. So I didn't realize, who knew? Like, yeah.
We have one comment in the Slack on this, and I guess it's kind of similar to this. One of the hangups, and this is Drew Siddell, one of the hangups I've had with pairing and would expect to have with mobbing is this. I find that I have work style differences. I tend to spend more time reading code and taking notes on paper with all the code after I understand, where I find most people try coding till it works. Like, how does that work? Is there some sort of thinking model?
There's sort of a both here thing. One of the things that we find we do a lot is retrospectives, which is a practice that I encourage in general. We tend to do them after. Well, so I work with teams in 2-hour segments. So we do them every 2 hours. But if a team is doing like full-time mobbing, they'll usually do it every 4 hours. So right before lunch, right before the end of the day. And you retro over what just happened. But there are teams that will do what they call mobadoros, which is 25 minutes of programming and then 5 minutes of retrospective, right? And so what are you saying about like slowing down and looking at what just happened and really taking the time to digest and understand that? That is really valuable. I co-founded a charity to teach kids, and we had the saying, it was like, there's the event of learning and there's the event of realizing you have learned, right? And so a lot of times you're getting this code to work, and then if you don't stop and sort of retrospect and what I think of as like burning the fuel of experience, you aren't actually going to learn. Like, you're not actually going to get that lesson. You'll have that experience, but then like you're not going to actually learn from that experience. And so taking that time to actually do that is really valuable and really important. And I think what that person is saying is, this isn't valuable to me, and I found this to be valuable. I don't want to lose that. And they're absolutely right. You shouldn't lose that. On the other hand, there's also a lot of value in like hammering at something till it works, right? And just being like, okay, I'm just going to push all the buttons, and then, okay, it turned out that, 8 is the button that opened the door. Now, okay, now why? Why did 8? Now let's reflect now that we know what the answer was, as opposed to let's study it before we know what the answer was. So there's a lot of value in that too. And the thing is, you don't want to lose either of them, right? So yeah, hammer, I have a saying, it's like preference action in the mob, right? So don't talk about something do it. And then, sure, make a branch, do it again, roll back, do it again, like try all our ideas, but then do what was suggested and go back and say, okay, which idea did we like? Why did we like it? What's actually going on here? What are we understanding? Right. And that is just as important because, again, so one thing that I have a very mathematical background, and one thing I really love was game theory. And when I first took my first game theory class, it was actually sneaking into a class at UCSD. Back then I had really long hair and they kind of just thought I was a grad student. So you could just show up at the class and they'd let you in. It was great. And so one of the things about game theory is I learned really quickly that games that repeat have very different victory strategies than games that are just one-off. Right. And the way that I think about this a lot is we used to play this game. It's now called Werewolf. There's you can buy it in the stores. Right. But we at the time we just played it with cards. It was called Killer for us. And we were playing at a wedding. And in this game, you have sort of two people who are secretly assigned to kill everybody. And everyone else is trying to figure out who they are. And we found out very, very quickly because we would assign cards. And if you got the aces, well, then you were the killers. And if you got anything else. And we went around this huge thing. And like on the first round, somebody had said they were like the 4 of spades. And then like all the way around, like 17 people later, someone else said they were the 4 of spades. And I remembered it. And I was like, wait a second, what did you say? What did you say? And they were like you knew that they were in trouble. And the lady just looked guilty as hell. And we lynched her. And she was lying and boom. And we were like, on round 1, we got one person, we got 17, but like we've won this game. And we went through the rest of the game and we were just, we got down to it was like the one other person had the 4 of spades and the bride and the groom. And like, they were like, I'm not lying to you, honey. I'll call off the marriage. And like, and it turned out both of them had picked the 4 of spades, but both of them were the killer. Right. And when we had lynched the first woman, we exonerated the second guy. And we're like, well, he must be telling the truth because she was lying. But it turned out they were both lying. The thing about that game is he beat us so profoundly that for the rest of the wedding, he could not make it past round 1. We would never let him live again because we never wanted to lose to him again. So by winning that game, he literally lost every other game in the weekend. And this is the thing with game theory, right? Where it's much like in game theory, the best strategies are almost always the strategies that allow you to keep playing. Mm-hmm. And this is this with your mob and with your team, the best strategies are going to be the ones that keep you being a good team tomorrow. There's a saying in practice, like the best practice is making sure you want to show up for practice tomorrow. Oh, and
on that note, because we do have to go because Sujong got announced the keynote. So Llewellyn Falco is going to be speaking today at 1:30 p.m. His talk is called Cutting Code Quickly from 0% to Cleanly Refactored 100% Tested Code. And you have a book on mob programming in practice. Is that it?
Yeah. Mob Programming Guidebook. Yeah, you can grab it for free. mobprogrammingguidebook.com.
Awesome. Llewellyn, thanks so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. This has been a wonderful conference.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
All right. So that's it. So we will see everybody in the show. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye.